Welcome to the Mechanical PE Exam Prep Podcast, the podcast where I give mechanical engineers like you the tools and motivation to get your professional engineering license and take your career to the next level. In this episode, I sit down with David, a mechanical engineer who recently passed the PE exam after 17 years in the oil and gas industry. David shares his unconventional journey into engineering, from a childhood fascination with machines to a career pivot into forensic engineering. He opens up about the challenges of balancing study time with a cross-country move, a midlife career shift, and even a brake failure on exam day. Packed with practical advice like leveraging AI for study help and the power of neuroplasticity, this conversation is a must-listen for anyone preparing for the PE exam or navigating a career in engineering. So with that, enjoy my conversation with David. Welcome, David, to the podcast. Excited to have you here. Congratulations on passing your PE exam recently.
Thanks.
And I'd love to start with just a bit of your background. You can go back as far as you'd like and maybe share with folks your academic background, professional, and sort of everything that got you up to the point of being ready to go for your PE.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the high level, but feel free to jump in with questions. I'd say always been somebody that's been intrigued by how things work. I remember a book when I was a kid that my mom got me. It was I'm forgetting the title of it now, but it was like the Raccoon's Mechanic Shop or Elephant Learns to Fly or something like that. It was always different, animals that created machines, and it was the lizard that wanted to go in the Arctic and the elephant that wanted to fly, and all these different machines. And it had dreams of putting a motor on my bike and all these kind of cool things. But Dad barely knew what a hammer was, and so did not have the mechanics dad support to make all that a reality. So didn't really kind of get into it, didn't know what an engineer was, honestly, until my senior year in high school. We had a good salesman from Mississippi State come into our calculus class, and remember vividly his first slide was, "Are you good at math and science?" And I thought, yeah. Second slide was, "Are you a people person?" I thought, yeah, sure, I'm a people person. The third slide was, "You should be an engineer." I thought, sweet. All right, now I don't have to go to the guidance counselor. I figure that one out. I'll just be an engineer. And
That's
then
great.
Really beyond that, it was find somebody that would give me scholarship money. And Louisiana State University was giving out scholarships for petroleum engineering. So I went for that. And they were offering a trip to geology field camp out in Colorado Springs. So I had 6 weeks of hanging out in the woods and seeing cool rock formations and traveling all through Wyoming and Arizona and Dinosaur National Park and all these cool places. So that was fun, and they were giving money to do it. So got into it, was enjoying the math and everything else. Before that, I thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer. That's what people that were good with math and science do. But then started learning more about engineering and really enjoyed it and liked it. Switched to mechanical because I didn't want to get stuck working for an oil and gas company. Which is ironic, having now spent 16, 17 years with an oil and gas company.
So how did that come to be?
Well, so switched to mechanical, started doing that, was enjoying it. Got an internship, actually interviewed with Shell, bombed the interview the first time, improved a little bit and went and worked for a small chemical company. And it was kind of nice. I think it did serve me well because I kind of cut my teeth figuring what was going on, all that hands-on experience that some of my classmates had from working on cars and, doing other things. I didn't really have, I was kind of the YouTube video guy.
Yeah, I can relate to that in your story for sure. And what you said just about in high school too, like kind of senior year, just being
exactly.
Like, oh yeah, I'm good at math, I'm good at science, like maybe engineering, and then just kind of being open to that and then seeing how it goes. And it sounds like your experience is similar. You kind of got pulled in once you started down that path.
Yeah, but it was good to start with a company. I feel a little reluctant saying this, but it was good to start with a company that wasn't quite as big and robust and had all the safety protocols as Shell, because with the smaller company, it was maybe a little bit more loosey-goose to let an engineer in training, somebody who's still in school, go out and design stuff and put on a harness and walk a pipe and actually get that field experience that might have been a bit more difficult if you were working for a Fortune 100 company. So that was good. I did that for a year and then interviewed with Shell again, got an internship and realized that could have made more in one summer than I made in the entire year working for the other company. So quickly decided that maybe oil and gas was worth giving a shot and started that, did a internship before my senior year, joined with them right out of school and went into a chemical plant in South Louisiana, our Geismar facility for Shell. Started with them and did a couple quick rotations through rotating equipment, fixed equipment, reliability engineering, kind of process engineer. You heard the term gopher engineer?
No.
It's the one that just, the engineer, go for this, go for that.
Oh.
Just kind of give it to them when you need something done.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So was kind of that gopher engineer, and then had a unique opportunity to go to Singapore for 2 years. So brought wife and young kid at the time, and packed up bags and went over to Singapore to support turnaround planning.
Wow, what an exciting opportunity for a young engineer at the beginning of their career to travel. And you said for 2 years you relocated family and everything.
Uprooted the family. I thought my mother-in-law was going to kill me. I was stealing her oldest daughter and the first grandbaby away. But my wife Julianne was had never thought about it. I had kind of been planting seeds for years about, hey, it'd be cool to do international, and Shell was a company that you could do that with. And so she took a jump of faith, and we went for it and learned a ton. The kind of interesting thing with being with Shell was that, back to the professional engineering license thing, it wasn't necessary because, big company like that, you're basically self-insured. And so a lot of that work, you can do in-house without the need for a PE license. And so I hadn't considered it much until actually right around the time I went to Singapore. Some of the other guys I was working with in the rotating equipment group had gone back and gotten their license. And one guy who I respected, really smart guy, had gone to take it, didn't pass. So that kind of scared me. But at the time I thought, hey, I'm probably going to spend 45 years with Shell. I'll retire, never really needing the license. I'll go back and get it if I want to later. But then, kind of fast forward, came back from Singapore, was working again in the Louisiana plant, went through a variety of different roles, instrumentation, and kind of process control support, did some innovative digital technology work for a couple of years, and then information management in my last year with Shell. And then eventually got to the point where business was changing. Some of the futuristic stuff I was working on, we didn't have the funds to keep going down that path. And so switched gears a little bit and kind of went to base plant. And so kind of, and all the changes of it kind of got wrapped up in a bit of a job role change. And I don't want to say layoff because I think that's maybe not the exact terminology, but job role disappeared. I had opportunities to look elsewhere. And
right, you could have looked internally or externally. Like it sounds like they gave you a lot of time to kind of mull that over, and you had both options on the table.
Very much so, yeah. And I, left on a very good note. A big company like that, they take care of people. That was part of the reason why I was planning on being with them for a long time. But on the way out, ended up landing a great gig with this group that I'm with now, Apex Applied Science and Engineering. So a unique team that is a recent join of two smaller companies that both did expert witness work or forensics engineering work, which was something that I had never really known about. I'm sure you've probably seen it on TV shows or something, right?
Yeah. What can you share about that? Because I think it's super interesting for people listening, like being an expert witness engineer. What kinds of things are you called on to do?
It's a variety of things. I mean, like I said, the little bit I had heard of was, the expert witness that comes in and says, this is how a bullet leaves a chamber, and, was it this bullet or that one, kind of thing. But in this case, for me, having the oil and gas background, a lot of it is major industrial incidents. Some company comes in and builds something and it goes wrong, and you kind of need to figure out what happened. Was it the original design? Was it the fabrication? Was it the installation? The startup? And so we could be representing either side. In most situations, it's an attorney that kind of brings us in because they need that expert help. They understand the legalities of what's going on, but they need to understand the science of, is the complaint valid? Could it have happened the way that somebody's saying it's happened? So that could be supporting a plaintiff or a defendant, and could be, like I said, $1 billion suit between two, large companies, or it could be something as small as like we've got one expert that does a lot of work with with various sporting goods, and like tree stands, for example. Somebody has a tree stand that they leave out in the rain for 20 years and try to climb up it one day when they're carrying a heavy backpack and it breaks and they decide
it
they
malfunctions and
exactly.
Yeah.
And so they want to turn around and sue the manufacturer and try to get tons of money out of them. And we come in and look at the science of it and say, no, this was not a manufacturing issue. This was a poor use, poor storage. Guy didn't read the warnings, didn't follow the protocols. Or the flip side, somebody gets hurt and we come in and say, yeah, this product was incredibly dangerous. It didn't meet code. Welds weren't done correctly. The safety factor was not what it was supposed to be. So
it's super interesting. It sounds like very satisfying to kind of be at, like searching for the truth is basically the way I look at it, and trying to, obviously you have clients and you have to kind of understand what's going on, but you're a witness. So it's like you look at the facts and try to make what you can of it.
Absolutely. No, I used to struggle sometimes telling my kids what I did in my previous roles. It's like, well, I work for the man and try to help them make more money. I was like, no, that's not a good explanation. I work for a company. I work for a company that makes soap, and everybody needs to clean things. That's a better way to put it. Or, I try to make the business safer. But with this new job, it's easy. Like you said, it's we're truth tellers. We figure out what happened, and whether that's good or bad for our client, they want to know what the truth is, and they want to know it quick. So we find creative, clever ways to figure out what that truth is before the other side does, so that we can help them make the right decision.
Nice. That sounds really cool.
So, but, I mean, that was how I got into the kind of the idea to go back for the PE license. It had been in the back of my mind as something, if I did move outside of Shell, it would come in really handy to have that. I was, confident I had the kind of the piece of the puzzle, which was, references. I'd worked with several PEs, and I had done the engineering work for years and years. Just was not entirely sure about how broad they were going to test us. And so I started doing a little bit of research and stumbled on your stuff where you were kind of going through, this is what to expect. And that was incredibly helpful. And I'm glad to see you're doing the kind of the podcast now too. I think that's another one where somebody could stumble on it and kind of learn a little bit about what to expect.
Yeah. So you didn't really need the PE necessarily at Shell, and you were potentially prepared to be there for a long time and maybe not get it and basically be okay with that. But once you realized that you might be moving on, you wanted it because it would give you potentially more options. And it turned out great because it is expected and required of you to have it where you are now. Is that right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's required. For example, some of the engineers that I work with are, PhDs or professors or such. And so their qualifications in many ways kind of speak for themselves.
Okay, so highly credentialed, but not necessarily professional engineers specifically.
Exactly. So not a mandate, but definitely something that's good to have. And it was kind of interesting to see that, it's not just, I used to think about it. It was a couple letters behind my name that I could use to, kind of jab at my brother that has an MD and, feels like he's better than me. But it's actually, it's a legitimate certification. It shows that you've done the work, that you've had the review done. It's not just kind of a little badge of honor or a sheet of paper you can hang on the wall. It's a legitimate kind of resume boosting milestone in your career.
Yeah, it's a good balance of the academic knowledge and the field knowledge together. The experiential aspect of it is not something that people can dismiss. And even people with a lot of field experience that maybe aren't as strong on the theoretical side will have a hard time with it. So I really think it's the intersection of those two things. And that's why it's valuable and important. And that's why it's hard to do. So,
and it goes back to that initial comment about, the way I was sold on engineering, which it is that balance of, people skills and science skills. And that's what's cool about this role is it's not just, hide in your cubicle and run a calculation to figure out why this thing broke. It's understanding the problem. It's kind of appreciating the context and then, kind of seeing how it fits into the bigger situation.
Yeah. And your experience also helps a lot with that. It's your ability to communicate that to, so there's definitely more of an interpersonal aspect in your current role than I'm sure some of those early days going through internships and stuff like that, where you're kind of just doing what you're asked and trying to learn as much as you can.
Very much so. And I will say, I appreciate, it's clear in the stuff that I listened to from you and kind of the few of our conversations, that's something that you both acknowledge and advocate for is that balance between okay, let me just learn the formulas and figure out how to solve problems and pass the test versus, understanding that this is a lot of work you're putting in and what are you going to get out of it and what's the right way to approach it. I remember when I was in, I think it was physics originally, in college, having kind of an aha moment when a teacher mentioned that we could have basically a cheat sheet of any formula we wanted to have. And I remember thinking, like, gosh, this fool, like, I'm just going to write down all the formulas.
All the formulas.
I'm solving the puzzles. All I have to do is figure out which variables he gave me and which formulas there are and manipulate them. And I'll get the answer right to everything. And then I feel like the first physics, you could do that, right? It was fairly straightforward. If you're good at math and solving problems, you could do it. But as it got more advanced, you start to realize why they're doing it. And it's because, the memorization is not the difficult part. It's the understanding what's going on. I think you did a good job in many cases of encouraging us to not just read the problem, find the formula, put in the variables and see if we could untie the knot. Yeah. Because most of the time in engineering, if you don't know if you don't understand what's going on, there's a decent risk you're going to stick in the wrong formula and come up with an answer that, solves itself. And you got the knot untied, but you untied the wrong knot.
Exactly. And it's just, I always come back to the Einstein quote. It makes me think of is everything should be made to be as simple as possible, but not simpler. And, our brains are thirsty for shortcuts. If we can simplify something and just get from A to B in the shortest possible path, then we want to do that. And of course you should do that if it's the right path, mm-hmm. But that's the whole game, is knowing what's the right path, not just in solving exam problems, but in working real life engineering problems. So that's the spirit of the whole thing.
Very much so. Yeah. I used to have a guy that, in our team, whenever we'd be doing investigations at Shell, he would talk about eliminating the obvious. We'd have something go wrong and we go out in the field and try to figure out, all right, what's going on. And you get tempted to say, all right, look, let's go pull the inspection plan. Let's go pull the original design documents. Let's go, do this. Check
Get ready to go wide and deep.
Exactly. Check the process data, check this. And then, somebody walks outside and, there's a crane leaning against it. And you're like, oh, all right, well, that was the problem. You could have just solved that by going out and putting your eyes on it.
Yeah.
Which in today's society, actually, oddly enough, one of the last roles I worked at Shell was I mentioned the kind of digitalization role. So we were looking at things like digital twin and can you move things to where you're dealing with models and not having to send people out into the plant all the time. And there is a delicate balance because, sometimes to get that context and to kind of see the bigger picture and, the forest through the trees, cliche, you do have to get out there and, put your hands on it and kind of walk around it. And sometimes even the laser scan from a couple months ago might not give it to you if you aren't familiar with the things. So you can't always outsource it to somebody that doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. We need both, right? We want the technology, we want AI, we want the models, but we also kind of need to get out there. And my old chief engineer always used to say, people would be writing emails back and forth and hypothesizing about what was going on. And he would call them up, say, why don't you come over and smell the equipment? Uh-huh. Sometimes you gotta walk through and actually look at stuff.
Very much so.
So what was it like for you once you got started actually studying? I'd love to hear a bit about your experience preparing and what your expectations were before, where that aligned, where it was surprising, where it was difficult. Kind of talk us through what you remember. I know it's been a few months, but what you were going through at that point.
No, I remember it well. So this was a trying time for me. So we were, like I said, looking at moving outside of Shell. And because of that, we were looking at moving across the country to get closer to family. So there was a lot going on, but I was
just what you need when you're right, gold and moving.
But it was also a kind of a unique time in my life. Oddly enough, it was right as I was turning 40. So I had kind of this, I guess by statistical, definitely midlife, midlife crisis moment to say like, all right, I'm gonna jump companies. I'm gonna go back and restudy and get my license. I'm gonna move across the country. I'm gonna do all these things. So it was biting off a lot. And at first, in fact, I remember, I think emailing you at one point saying, hey, it'd be really cool if I could get this done in 3 months. I've got all this going on, and it'd be nice to be able to start fresh in January, kind of not miss a beat. And, maybe on my way out of Shell, I have just enough time to kind of hit it nights and weekends and get this done. And I remember you saying like, yeah, it can be done. People have done it. But if you're really honest with yourself, look at how many hours you need to put in and spread that out and come up with a plan. And I think I was a little over ambitious to start. When I got your class and started listening to things, like, oh, this is great. I can just put it on in the background and, listen while I do anything, and I'll be done in no time. And then when I finally sat down and started working some problems, I thought, all right, yeah, this is not the same as having the earbuds in when you're on a walk with the kids in the afternoon, kind of halfway there.
Yeah, half checking on them, half listening.
Exactly. So I ended up, I took your advice after I started reading through some of the material you had about getting the schedule, doing an hour or two every day and giving myself a bit more time. So I set my target out to February and kind of figured I was going to be in that 100 to 150 hours of kind of legitimate study time before I'm done. And I'll have to check here. I've still got my notebook, kind of where I ended up on those, how many hours I put into it. But basically it was, my routine was wake up in the morning, hop on the stationary bike, do 45 minutes of listening and watching while I ride the bike, just to kind of get my mind in the right mindset. Had my, happy light, the high lumen daylight thing to kind of wake me up a little bit.
Wake you up.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
And then go straight from that into just an hour of solving problems, pen to paper, looking at the book, going through it, take a break, give a kiss to the kids as they were walking out the door for school, grab a cup of coffee, maybe make a quick breakfast, and then come back down and do another solid hour of, focused study. I think a lot of people wouldn't have that luxury. At this point, I was doing contract work with Apex at the time. So it made it a bit more easy to kind of get that extra hour in before things got crazy.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that schedule. I think for anyone listening, I know there's folks out there that, have really young kids and they have to go to an office. So like, it's just tough in those situations to make it all work. But if you can somehow manufacture that kind of a schedule, what you just described, especially like, I love your dedication to getting up and hitting the exercise first, because that just wakes you up, and then an hour, and then food and coffee, and then another hour. I mean, that's supercharged, and it's right at the beginning of the day. So now it's like mid-morning, and you've already conquered your studying for the day. You can let it rest till tomorrow morning and rinse and repeat. Yep.
And I think with a big challenge like this, the schedule is a really important piece. And I like spontaneity. I like to be able to have the freedom to do different things, but this is one where you really have to stay on it so you don't lose track. I've got a bad history of exercising where I do 6 to 9 months of being really good at it, and then take a day off, and then you take a week off, and a week becomes 2 weeks. Before you know it, you're gone 6 months, and you have to kind of go again. So I didn't want to risk that. So I wanted to make sure that I had the focus on it.
Yeah, that's great. And what about the content itself as you kind of went through? Were there parts that were smooth for you, and were there parts that were particularly hard? Or was it more about just sort of the broader stuff that was going on and kind of your day-to-day that made it hard?
No, I think for me, so honestly, I remember in college, some of the systems and fluid stuff was some of the more difficult. And I think a lot of it is translating the kind of the hands-on, practical side of your mind to the theoretical, like what's happening inside the atoms and kind of how things fit together. Coupled with the always inconvenient conversions between SI and imperial units. But when I got started on it and chose to go that route instead of the mechanics and machine design, which I think I actually enjoyed a lot of that more in college, but was challenging myself a little bit to say, hey, look, let's take the stuff that maybe was not as easy for me and kind of focus on that. And I think you had some advice about the fact that the topics also are fairly complementary. So if you haven't been doing all this day in and day out, work in design like I hadn't, that this is one that kind of builds on itself nicely as you go through the program.
Yeah,
I thought it did. But yeah, I got a little disheartened after the first was the first section, like went through and worked all the problems, then went and did the practice quiz and failed it miserably. And kind of kicked myself and thought, man, have I really forgotten this much of it? And then, went through it again and everything clicked. And the second section, I'm forgetting now whether it was heat transfer, but everything, it all started making sense. And it was really just kind of brushing the dust off of, some of these calculations because, the types of engineering work I was doing was different. I wasn't doing the design side. It was more the troubleshooting side, or, instead of working on, what was some of the ones you do a lot of, like the, HVAC related items, or, a turbine. Like we only had 2 major gas turbines in our facilities. So, a lot more pumps than turbines. And so those were kind of eating my lunch for a little while. Then I changed my approach after the first section and decided to do, instead of work through the problems initially and then go back and watch the solutions. That's when I switched my routine and started doing, let me listen ahead one time through. That way I've at least seen you work through them, and then go back to the beginning and start fresh. So I didn't feel like it was cheating myself because I'm like watching the solution and then working the problem. Like I'd go through all 60 of them and then go back and start over. But I did find that was nice because it kind of got my mind thinking through it. You start to see some of the kind of the traps and tricks that are in the problems. And so when you go through, working the problem out on pen on paper, you've already kind of got that in the back of your mind. So that was a big change for me that helped out. I think one of your interviewees was talking about making Word documents where he explained the entire way he worked it out. I thought that was very admirable, to say the least.
Not for everyone, but a lot of high level of commitment there to go through that.
But whether it's that, or it's, my listen first, then work it, or if you're somebody that, does better with pen and paper, I think it's nice that your course has a balance of watch, listen, write, hard copy versus digital. So that was really good for me because I could try it one way, and then if that didn't work, switch it and lean more on one version.
Sometimes first of all, it's very personal. Like you said, people have different just preferences, how they like to do things. And then there's also, you're kind of discovering your own needs in that particular situation. Like some things, a super light touch might be enough. Like a lot of people now are telling me that they're working on iPads or some kind of digital with a stylus or a pen tablet or something like that. And it took me a while. I do the office hours, and all the recordings are obviously done with a pen tablet, but that was a big adjust. And you kind of have to learn how to use it. Like some of my older content, the handwriting's really bad. And now I've gotten used to it. But if I was actually working a problem for the first time and I had to deal with the hurdle of the technology on top of trying to think about the problem, that would be so distracting for me. So I'm a whiteboard guy because it's physical and manual and it's right in front of me, or pencil and paper if I can't get my hands on a whiteboard. But that's just me. Other people are really comfortable, whether it's with docs or iPad or PDFs. So you kind of got to go with what works best for you.
Yeah, the only warning I'd give there is you don't get an iPad in the final exam. So if you're
that's right, you're not going to.
If you're comfortable with it studying, just make sure you're also comfortable doing it the other way. Because
you're right. They're going to give you it's like a marker board or sheets, or how do they?
Yeah, it's like laminated paper with a dry erase marker on top of it.
I've heard all kinds of horror stories about that, like people not having enough sheets, or the sheets don't erase real well, or they accidentally smudge their sheet and then need to look back
I had
at
one
it.
that like the pen wouldn't work the first. It was like it wanted you to get just frustrated enough, and then the pen would work. Kind of deal.
Would they give you more stuff without any? Is it annoying if you ask for like, hey, this is not working?
No, they were pretty good. I will say I had a number of other kind of oh crap moments in the whole lead up to it, which we can get into in a minute.
Oh, tell me.
But it was the pad itself was good, and they it was Pearson Views, the company that does it. They were pretty good. The folks monitoring it were very responsive. So it wasn't a problem. But just saying, if you're somebody that's studying with an iPad and a stylus, just make sure that you can translate that over to something where you can't smart click or drag and drop or jump over the web.
No fancy stuff.
I also wanted to throw out too. You mentioned earlier mentioned AI and kind of that balance of it. I will say one of the things that I leaned on, and kind of looking back in retrospect, how I would have approached this differently. I struggled with the asynchronous nature of the communication. So I went for the full package where I had all the options available to me, so I could do the kind of multi-mode approach to it, not just kind of buy the book, or a bit against my nature to go with a more expensive package. But I think going back, I probably should have gotten, what's your top package where you get a bit more like live interaction with you?
Well, we have the full access bundle, which is the one you did, and it's a 2-week bi-weekly office hours for every other Monday we meet for an hour, and that's kind of the live part with the group, and then just do like 20-minute check-in chats along the way, which we did a few of. And then
I thought you also offered some sort of a kind of a white glove option on top of that.
Yeah, I also work just with a very small group of kind of one-on-one, where basically it's like we're college classmates and we're going to do all of our studying together. Like that's the level. I'm going to basically become part of your family for the next 4 to 6 months. And, we can't do it in person because people are spread out all over, but it's basically going to be like, we're texting throughout the week, email me anytime, we'll get on the phone as needed. And, that's a significant investment for folks that want to do it that way. But for someone that's, later in their career, it's not an economic thing. It's more about just, I don't want to do this alone. I want someone who's going to like stand by my side every step of the way. I'm willing to do the work and put in the time, but I just want like direct, immediate support. That's what that white glove.
And I think looking back on it, so the cost of the full access bundle, just being frugal initially was a bit of a sticker shock, and then I thought, wait a minute, how many hours am I putting into this? And I need legitimate help and somebody that knows what they're doing. So that was an easy one to justify. But I think looking back on it, I probably should have gone for that extra white glove support and paid a little bit extra to have you on speed dial, because there was a number of times where I had a question and I didn't want to wait for the next office hours, and you email a question over and then say, okay, I'm going to move on with my day, but then it's just kind of nagging at you at the back of your mind while you're trying.
And then they're foundational too. So if you're working on a problem and you don't scratch that itch, and then the next problem and the next problem, the next problem are kind of counting on you already having ticked those boxes, and then it becomes this bigger question. By the time you satisfy it, it could be a week later and you're like, oh God, all of those questions depended on that.
And so to tie it back to the whole AI discussion, what I ended up doing, and I guess I didn't really realize it, what I was paying for, I bought the advanced subscription to ChatGPT. And I did.
Oh, yeah? This is interesting. How did that work?
It worked really well. I was surprised. My mom always laughs about, how stupid AI is, because she reads the translations on YouTube videos that are generated by AI, and they're missing stupid stuff, and
they're all over the place.
Very obvious. And so she's always saying, I wouldn't trust it. And obviously you have to be very careful what you trust from it. But just as a sounding board, I found it was great. So I would I'd start to type you an email and then think to myself, man, this is going to take like a week for him to get back to me. I'm going to go listen to the office hours. In the meantime, it's going to be nagging me. And then I tried it out, because I had started paying the, whatever it is, $20 a month for the advanced model access. And so I'd take a screenshot of your problem and drop it in there and say, I'm struggling with how this works. Can you explain it to me? And it would give you a really robust explanation of what's going on with pictures and calculations. And again, some of the simple stuff, it would get blatantly wrong. You'd have to, I couldn't trust the math. I think it does struggle a little bit on some of the
Isn't that funny how powerful these language models are, but with stuff that's just like really logical, which you think computers would be great at, somehow they break down on. It's the mixing of language and math together. The way humans talk and think in numbers naturally, the computer seems to just separate those two. And I know it's going to get there. It's just a matter of time. Right now, it's a little rocky.
But it was really helpful to kind of call out things. Whether it was you're familiar with the rubber duck approach to coding deprogramming?
Sounds familiar. Tell me.
So I had a guy one time in the digital systems group that was telling me about the rubber duck approach. Apparently, coders, which I am not, have a rubber duck approach, which is where you explain your code to a rubber duck. Basically just telling it to a inanimate object, and in doing so, you end up finding errors in it. And so I think in the same way, typing out a question to the language model, to ChatGPT, sometimes as I'm typing it and kind of drawing pictures, it clicks. You're like, oh, right, forgot this piece here. Or it would give you an answer that then shines a light on, oh, that's right. In this particular situation, you can't assume that this is going to be zero because you haven't told me that, this is an assumption. So I have to back it up a step. So it was really good at eliminating some of the, what for you would probably be churn, emails that just come through and, you say, hey, look, I've already answered that, or, here's the easiest solution to it.
Oh, and the most important thing is that you were able to troubleshoot it on your own, which is a hard won point that nobody can take from you. If I give it to you quickly and easily, then you may not stick, or it may not feel as you may not value it as much. But when you're hunting for something, just the hunger of trying to get something answered, that's something that sticks with you after. So, and that's why I always say, like, studying is never going to be a frustration-free process. It can't be, because it's learning, and like learning isn't easy.
Yeah.
But we can make it easier. Like, we can at least take the path that you have to go down and make it clear where, like, what the steps are.
Yeah, or at least make sure that whatever frustration is benefiting you the most.
You're getting something for it, and not just banging your head against the desk.
Exactly. Yeah. There's productive stress and not productive stress. Eustress, EU. Versus distress.
Just like exercise, you can't overdo it, but some of it is great. A little is great. A lot is not so great.
I'm safe to assume you're familiar with Andrew Huberman Labs.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, so I remember listening to one of his podcasts, and he was talking about the benefits of that when you do get frustrated learning something, that extra 20, 30 minutes you put onto it afterwards. Once you hit that point of, I'm frustrated, I'd like to give up. If you spend another little bit beyond that, there's, I forget about the exact science of it, but basically that's the time where your brain starts basically opening up to, digging new paths and connecting new neurons. That they've basically shown that's when you're most flexible to, they call it the neuroflexibility, where you're kind of relearning things.
Wow, that's fascinating. I never heard that, but that definitely makes sense from experience. It's like there's almost the frustration gives way to almost a kind of desperation, where you're like you said, you want to give up, and you're just kind of like disgusted by the whole thing. But if you're stubborn about it, then you won't give up. You'll keep grappling with it. And since you're a little bit more desperate than you were a few minutes ago, you're a little bit more open to, like, maybe it's something very different from the previous line of thinking that I had.
Yep.
And then new ideas are allowed to come in.
So for me, as somebody that was, like you said, later in career, not as a fresh and moldable brain as, a 21-year-old, the neuroplasticity hacks. And I know
so we have to find ways to get leverage on our own, exactly, on our own psychology to try to push things in there.
He's big on not calling them hacks. They're just the way the mind works, but that was a big one. And then the other one was micro breaks. So when you're learning something, just taking in the middle of a lecture, pausing it and taking even 5 seconds to just kind of think about what you just heard and then continue on, apparently has a really big impact on your ability to process it. So between that exercise, light therapy stuff, getting in the routine, pushing that extra 20, 30 minutes past frustration, and then doing those little micro breaks were all little things that made it that much more productive.
Those are fantastic ideas. And like you said, right from Huberman, right? So, I mean, there's some of the best research out there. Wow. I love those. I was one more thing that made me think about as it relates to, like, our psychology. I'll bring it up if I think about it again, but wow.
Absolutely.
So those
I love kind of nerding out on that stuff. And I think there's a lot of people that are going into that space nowadays. So lots of content out there. And I like how you kind of hinted at some of it in your introductory material. And I think kind of talk about it in some of your office hours and others, things to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck.
Yeah. And I'm still learning. I mean, just some of those things that you brought up there, they resonate, but they weren't something that I could have articulated until you said them. So, those are ideas that people can take away and use right away. So that's pretty exciting. I think about it too, in terms of, like you said, learning when I was younger versus learning something now. It's different. You could say it's harder and just complain about that, or you could say it's different and we need different strategies. And that's just the way it is.
Absolutely. No, I think you're right. It is a different time, but I also was pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed it. I remember thinking It's like the second week I was doing problems and was kind of in that rhythm. And in fact, if you check your email, I want you to pull it up if you can easily. I got so excited on doing it, doing the problems, I started thinking like, man, maybe I should go back to college. I really enjoy solving these kind of problems. This is fun. I love learning this stuff again. Again, not that I didn't know it or use it in some facet for 15 plus years, but just kind of the intricate details you don't always get into in day-to-day support of a chemical plant. And got to the point where, again, because we were moving across country, we were talking about wallpapers and things we could do in this little dungeon basement underneath our stairs. And we were kicking around ideas that might be relevant to us on wallpapers and such. And somehow or another, in doing the engineering stuff, stumbled on these ideas of a wallpaper of calculations. And so I was shopping around for could I get a wallpaper that had all these common calculations and such. And between my wife Julianne and I were talking about it, somehow or another we stumbled on the idea of just doing it ourselves. And so, again, while I'm all jacked up on engineering formulas and stuff, decided to hand paint, with a Sharpie marker, the wallpaper and engineering formulas. So I don't know.
I have not seen this. You never sent this to me.
Yeah. Let me see. Did it, see if it came through? Yeah. I took a couple pictures. Let's see. To Dan at mechanicalpeexamprep.com from me 20 minutes ago, right before we started. I took a couple pictures of the bathroom. Yeah, if you can show it up on there. Basically in this tiny little 2 foot by 4 foot bathroom, I just had a Sharpie marker and was just writing formulas all over the wall every time I went in there.
This is great. I got it down.
So I noticed we've got a little, there's I think a book on one of the pictures, all the things you could learn while you're on the pot kind of like toilet reading. But I've got it, hand painted all over the wall as well. So
I'll put this up for a second just for folks to enjoy. I got to zoom in a little bit too. Oh, I love this. You got cycles up there. You got, unit conversions.
But it was nice. I mean, every time I walk into the bathroom, it's like, oh, that's right. Yep, that's an important one. Okay, yep, good refresher on that.
A little econ here, down here. Oh man.
So yeah, all the nerds that come over to the house, whether they're engineers or neighbors in finance, and said that it was reminding him of a big exam he had to take. But everybody kind of appreciates it from their own perspective.
It's art.
Yep.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that and the I was also hinting at earlier the issues with the day of exam. That was the other kind of milestone moment for me. So
yeah.
I took your advice, had the schedule prepared out, stopped my studying, within a couple of days of the final exam, drove to the location, which was 40 minutes away from me, to make sure that I knew where it was. I think I did that 3 days in advance and got there, and it was very confusing. The directions were not quite clear. The door was shut. It had some weird a sign that said only test examiners allowed in, but then it was shut and said don't come in. And since I wasn't an examiner, I didn't want to go in and interrupt everybody. It was very strange. I've done one of these tests before for my real estate exam, and you walk into a big room and there's a lobby and it's very clear. In this case, it was a kind of this one door in a hallway. So then I thought, okay, glad I did this 3 days in advance. I'll go again 2 days in advance. The second time I went in, it was normal. They let me in. They kind of showed me around, said how things would work, double checked my ID, which was new. So made sure that wasn't going to be a problem. So everything was fine. Day of, do my normal routine, get ready to go, hop in the car, get 10 minutes down the road and come to a stop, and the brakes on my Jeep are feeling a little squishy. And so I kind of go a little bit further and get to a spot in the road where I know it's safe and say, let me just test these out. So I pushed the brakes all the way down to stop real quick, and the brakes just went all the way down. The car just kind of continues rolling a little bit. Thought, oh crap. Brakes were completely shot. But at this point, I had not factored in a get new brakes on the way to the exam.
That's not in the plan.
So did a quick, safety analysis and kind of think through like, all right, I've got 4-wheel drive on this car. It's got big, heavy wheels. I've got the emergency brake,
e-brake manual. That's where my brain's going.
Exactly. So, drove slow with flashers on and emergency brake and slowing down, but
you had to drive like another half hour like that?
Darn determined. I think it was like 20 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Trying to take back roads and everything else. But,
and then you got that on your mind while you're in the exam. Like, I got to get home after this.
Exactly. Yeah. So in between my first session and second session, I was outside in the parking lot, laying on my back, taking pictures of the inside of the Jeep, trying to figure out what had exploded and where I could get a replacement part. And on the way home that night, after a 9-hour exam, had to stop by AutoZone and in 30-degree weather, try to change out the brake line on my Jeep. So it was,
holy crap.
It was an eventful day, but I thought fitting for a mechanical engineer.
Unbelievable. The stuff life throws at you, like that could have happened any other day, that you hopped in the car to go do something that wasn't time sensitive or that you hadn't been preparing for 6 months.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong. So for all the listeners, the disclaimer is I would not suggest driving without brakes. Probably should have pulled over and gotten a cab, but probably was not thinking entirely straight at the time.
Eyes on the prize.
So yeah, I think things will come up. At least having the forethought to make sure everything else was together and the studying was in place made that one curveball the only curveball I had to deal with.
Yeah. Oh, right. I feel like if somebody was kind of on the edge in terms of their knowledge and skills and confidence level and everything else, and then you have something like that happen, it could really throw you off. But once you got there and you got in, you just put it out of your mind and get to work, right?
Exactly. Yep. And I mean, fortunately, I'd done the 2 practice exams that you included and went ahead and bought a third one through NCs. So had done the full on, sit through the exam and had gotten, I wasn't comfortable in my score, but I at least passed it, a couple times on the practice exam. So, between your course and the practice exams was feeling good enough that didn't send me into a tailspin.
Yeah. Yeah, you had enough in the tank. You got it done.
Yep. And it was, I will say I didn't walk out, smiling and patting myself on the back. It definitely was a long, trying day, and they throw you some curveballs. I do think some of the way they frame things up is not exactly the same way you do it. I think that's intentional. They continuously, change things. But the bulk of it, obviously I knew enough to get it passed. The bulk of it was similar, but it definitely is something you got to have your head straight for. I remember on the first half of the second session, I hit one really troubling problem and just couldn't get it right. And luckily I had the kind of forethought to say, you know what, I'm going to put this one aside. I'm going to move on, come back to it at the end. And I remember I came back to it at the end and worked until every second came out, just because I was determined and wanted to figure it out. But that was one of those moments where, again, if you haven't done the preparation, if you don't have your head right, that, you get one of these curveballs and it can just completely derail you.
Yeah. You may spend too much time on it. And the worst thing about that is not just the time, but the energy, because you had this momentum going, you were working problems successfully and orderly, and then you cloud yourself up with this one that you don't know how to do, and it just takes you out of that rhythm. So it's better to just keep going and come back to those few that you need to, if you do, and that's the better play.
Absolutely.
So, but you found out a week later, and by the way, what you said about, walking out of there not exactly feeling great is not unusual, because A, it's 9 hours and it's a long day, but also
your brakes don't work, so you still got to figure that out.
But you got that on.
Yeah.
But it's just like they do throw you curveballs, and candidates that are successful rarely tell me that they walked out of there knowing, with a high level of confidence that they had this thing beat. Most people say, I felt okay, but not great. There's kind of that uneasy feeling, and then you got to wait and see. So, I mean, I think it comes from humility. It comes from just having really done the work and spent enough time with these problems to know that you can be confident and have it not work out. So it's better to just kind of put your confidence level aside and do the best you possibly can, which you did. You grinded into the last minute and let the chips fall where they may. But, you trusted in your preparation, you left it all out there. And then what was it, a week later, you got the result?
Yep. And that was a big win. I got that email. I mean, talk about a load off your chest. Like you said, I mean, it's one of those ones where, humble enough to say I could have missed it. A lot of these things, in my opinion, a lot of the questions are not 100% right, wrong from the standpoint of, if you gave every engineer the problem and the answer, that they would all agree it works out perfectly. Because I think a lot of this it depends on the assumptions you're making, right? It's not a problem where they're giving you, like an investigation you're working on where you've got, all the background stuff and you can put all the facts together and, they've got to, in 50 words or less, frame up this problem.
Right.
And so they're counting on you making reasonable engineering judgments and assumptions, and not everybody's going to make the same assumptions. So it's not like a true math problem from high school where there's a definitive, everybody knows this is the exact right answer. I think there's some shades of gray in it.
I think so too. Yeah.
But, was within a reasonable degree of engineering certainty that I had done well enough. But always good to see that email come through and then get the process rolling and get the official certification. So.
Fantastic. So it's done. Any implications of that now that it's done in terms of, we talked a little bit about your new role at the beginning, but does that mean anything for you for the future?
I mean, it's not like it's a pay raise or anything like that, but definitely I think is an easy way to kind of show that I'm a real engineer. Obviously I'm new to this space. My experience in the industry, I think, goes a long way. Somebody looks at my resume, they can understand that I know how these things work. But up against a PhD that's been, doing forensics engineering for 10 years, would be a little easy to say, hey, this guy doesn't have the same credentials, versus now, I've got the proof. It's backed by the government. I've shown that I can do it.
Yeah, and I think it's about complementing the skill sets of the folks in your group that are doing that, right? So you're filling in some of their gaps, and they're filling in some of yours, and collectively, you're able to put things together better than they would be without you. So
very much so, yeah. And that's actually a cool thing about Apex is we do have a good mix of skills and backgrounds, and we're actually growing. So if you have any engineers out there that are listening that are interested into the space, we're based out of Baltimore, but support clients all over the world, really. We do rely on that balance. We've got some folks that are really deep in the material space, others that have tons of experience on the mechanical design and kind of strengths of various metals and structures. We're kind of building out eventually in the electrical space, and for me, cool. of the oil and gas. So it is good to be able to lean on each other. But now I know going into a deposition or, kind of somebody cross-examining that I can at least stand by, I am an engineer. It's not just I went to school 18 years ago and got a degree. It's, no, I'm licensed and current and board approved.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, congratulations and good luck in the new role. And for anyone listening, if expert witnessing is something that you're interested in learning more about, shoot me an email. I'll get you in touch with David.
Absolutely. Or if you're designing something and it goes awry and you've got lawyers involved, give us a call. We're glad to try to help you get out of trouble or help your company get out of trouble. Or, somebody screwed something up and you were using a product and it hurt you. Give us a ring. We might know an attorney that wants to help you.
Cool. And any last minute advice that you would share, any sound bites or things for folks that want to follow in your footsteps and are going for their PE? Well, you obviously shared some very useful study advice there, but, any main takeaways?
Hard to put one. I'll give you the shameless promotion. Kind of the one takeaway is buy Dan's package.
Thank you. Believe it or not, I wasn't fishing for compliments there, but I will accept it.
I'm not getting paid for that, but in all honesty, I did a lot of searching around to see other things that were out there. And like I said, this was a bit against my normal MO. I've had the endearing term of discount Dave.
Your first inclination was just to do it as independently as you could.
Yeah, I don't need to spend $1,000 on getting somebody to help me. I'm just going to go watch some YouTube videos and read a book or two. Maybe I'll pay $50 for a practice exam. And once you start doing the math, 150 hours, 100 hours of preparation and all the different ways it could go. So glad that I decided to get some expert help. I think it's so cool that you decided to do this approach, of kind of having your story of getting your license, and then after time deciding, hey, maybe I'll help other people out, and then hey, maybe I'll make this full time. I just think is a really, really cool way that things can unfold. Kind of hobbies and passions become careers and lifelong pursuits. So I think it's great, and I'm glad to be an advocate for you because I think it goes a long way. You helped me. I was terrified. I mentioned this before. One of the guys that I worked with had taken the exam, I think 5 times,
Wow.
and not passed. He had super smart guy, like intimidatingly smart, but just didn't put in the studying, and didn't take it seriously. Didn't get a training package or anything like that. So just kept taking it and just kind of relying on the fact that he's a smart engineer, and that's not enough to get it. And so I was a little intimidated and terrified at the beginning, but having the right support structure in place, having the right path in front of you, and then just like I said, follow the path. And if it hadn't worked out, I'd have gone back and done it again, but would have been twice as confident the second time as it was the first time. So I think it was an excellent find, and can't thank you enough for the support.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, and it's been a fun journey for me too. You talk a little bit about, kind of the transition to doing what I'm doing now. And, working with engineers like you is how I feel like I kind of stay relevant. And it's cool because I worked with a group of engineers before. We were doing one specific thing. We were working in the built space, making data centers, making trading floors. And you get really good at kind of doing that one thing. But now I get to talk to engineers that are doing all kinds of different things. And I feel like, in a way, my influence has expanded, but it's not me directly doing it. It's sort of just being, this invisible background of engineers that are taking that next step in their career. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And
I'm curious. I'll ask one question to you. I'll turn the tables here. So, most interesting engineer career path or job from somebody you've interviewed thus far, somebody that came through your PE course?
there's a lot of different ones. I had a gentleman on that landed a job at NASA.
Oh yeah.
So I would say that's probably the most interesting one. I think we had him on toward the beginning of this year, if anybody wants to go back and check that one out. But yeah, that to me was like space, like
Right.
that you read about it, you think about it as a kid. And even now, like I think the whole world likes to watch SpaceX and Elon and
Yep.
everything that he's doing. And, just this whole paradigm shift of being able to launch a rocket and then capture it and reuse it instead of just saying all those hundreds of millions of dollars down the drain and we got to start over.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be a part of anything that involves space to me is just kind of a mind-bending thing that humans have figured out how to do. So that would
Very
be my
much
number
so.
one.
Cool.
Well,
Man,
thanks
I
again,
appreciate
David,
the
for coming
time,
on.
and
Yeah,
best of luck to you.
really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for coming on. Good luck with everything, and keep in touch.
Sounds good. And I'll say too, you mentioned you've got my name. Other people can look me up. I'm happy to help. I forgot to mention earlier the Facebook group you've got. Once you join the team and buy the full access, lots of helpful people there. So thanks to them, and can only be right to return the favor. So if anybody has questions and Dan doesn't answer them, feel free to look me up and reach out through LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Excellent. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Mechanical PE Exam Prep Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review to help other engineers find the podcast. And if you're looking for a program that will help you pass the PE exam, check out the full access bundle available at mechanicalpeexamprep.com, and feel free to reach out with any questions. I would be honored to be your guide on the journey to becoming a professional engineer.